Yeah, you got Mac and Mac here on Birds 365. We have no hats on. Brandon Lee Gowton does have a hat on. Is that an eagle? Is that a bird there, right there?
It's the BGN eagle. So,
all right.
My own
that works.
Yeah, self-promotion. Always
yeah.
Very good.
I said I'd wear a Birds 365
of course.
hat, but I will not wear a Philadelphia Eagles hat.
Now, do you have to pay royalties to the Eagles for that, or just, hey, it's a bird? The Eagles were around long before the Philadelphia Eagles were around. We can use any eagle we want. Is there any trademark stuff going on there?
That's above my pay grade, but as far as I know, I think it's all kosher.
Very good answer, Brandon Lee. Very good answer. All right, now we need that many more very good answers. I asked this of John first question today, so I'll ask it of you as well. Between Nick Sirianni, Howie Roseman, Jeff Lurie, all expected to speak in the next 24, 48 hours. Anybody going to drop a bomb on us that we're not seeing coming, that Jeffrey Lurie is going to admit that he asked Nick Sirianni to make all his sporting wagers for him and puts money into fund if need to be, or that Howie Roseman knew that Jason Kelce was retiring in like October and just never told anybody? We going to get anything really juicy out of these guys over the next 2 days?
I think we'll get something maybe mildly interesting. I'm just trying to think back to even last year, and I'm off the top of my head. I'm not thinking of anything that was so revelatory, but I'm remiss in forgetting something. But no. And then the other thing is that, obviously could come out of this week is a personnel move or two, as we've seen in the past. Sometimes the owners meeting kind of rekindles some of the free agent discussions or trades are going on, whatnot. So we could see a roster move or two.
Yeah, Hassan Reddick would be the splashiest one. The Eagles obviously moved back the $1 million payment to April 1st. Where are we now? March 25th. So, there's some sense of urgency. Not that the Eagles care all that much about spending $1 million. Jeffrey Lurie has proven time and time again he'll go above and beyond if it's best for the team. But BLG's thoughts, yes or no? Hassan Reddick, a Philadelphia Eagle or not? And we'll do it both April 1st by April 1st and just in general.
I think for me, if you're asking me, should they keep him? I think they should find a way to do that. But in terms of what seems to be the writing on the wall between, Bryce Huff and making more money than Hassan Reddick now, and Hassan Reddick's desires, I think the Eagles would be best to play hardball a bit with Hassan Reddick and try to make him come back on the final year of his deal or work something out. But ultimately, I do think there's a decent chance that he gets traded at this point, now that Bryce Huff's definitely on this team. Josh Sweat is definitely back this year. Reddick does seem to be the odd man out, and that's tough because it's a premium position, and I feel like you're just getting worse there depending on what you get back in return for him. I would think before the draft, I guess, maybe is what ultimately you're looking at, because at that point, what does a 2025 pick do for you in return for Hassan Reddick? So I would have to think within the next month.
And the thing that is the way things have shook out with Reddick, and this has been completely surprising to me, that the league doesn't value. I value Hassan Reddick a lot. I'm not sure how much the Eagles do. I'm not sure how much the rest of the NFL does. Maybe I have a higher opinion of Hassan Reddick than anybody else, but right now the Eagles don't have to do anything, because what big cap play is left out there? Justin Simmons is probably it. They're under the cap. They're well under the cap. They got a couple of contracts they haven't reported yet, so it's going to shrink, but they're in one of the best cap positions in the league. The whole reason for moving Hassan Reddick was we can't take a $21 million hit this year. Yeah, they can. They've already put their roster together, and Hassan's $21 million is still counting against it. So I don't think the Eagles are as forced to do it as we may have thought 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, a month ago. But then the same thing goes for Reddick, too. If he went out there and shopped and there's absolutely nothing in a trade, did both the Eagles and the Reddick camp overvalue what Hassan Reddick is actually worth on the open market?
I think, the Brian Burns trade was revealing in terms of what the market was going to be around for Hassan Reddick. And it's just not something that I feel like you have to leap at and be like, honestly, in general, a lot of these trades we've seen this offseason, the returns for them for players have been for the most part, like relatively meager. So yeah, I just don't get why there would be a rush to trade him. And to your point, Jody, yeah, it's like they're all on the roster right now. It's not like it can't possibly happen. And I know there's attitudes and egos and whatnot to consider there. But again, I think that's at a point where, and Eagles typically don't do this, but I feel like sometimes there's a time and place to kind of play hardball a little bit and make things a little bit uncomfortable. But I think that would be for the greater good ultimately.
Yeah, in a different position, but L'Jarius Sneed as well. He goes, and because of the contract, the value in draft compensation isn't as much as it should be. So, similar thing in theory for Hassan Reddick, and we all know how he's hanging on for dear life for that second round pick. I don't think it's coming, BLG. So it's going to be interesting. But I don't think the Eagles, from the Eagles standpoint, they don't want Reddick to play on the last year of his deal because of the cap hit, even though, as you said, they're under the cap. It shouldn't matter, but they see that $21 million cap hit for whatever reason. They don't want to do business that way. So there is a little bit of sense of urgency. And I don't know how you bring Hassan Reddick back and pay him less than Bryce Huff. I don't know how you can do that. So what you can do is maybe convince him to come back at 18 million and rework a deal for 1 year, give him the guaranteed money up front, get the cap number down with some voidable years. That's how we work, right?
Right. But let me ask you about that, John. That to me would be counterproductive. Why would you do that? Because you're only adding a cost at some point down the road. You're going to add voidable years, and at some point it's going to be dead cap money. If you can afford to pay him 21 now, have a $21 million cap hit, isn't that advantageous? Because down the road, you're not going to pay any charges. You're not going to have like interest payments on your cap. If you're not in desperate need of it, isn't it better to get it all over and done with right now than push it out over time?
Yeah, well, no, because he's already got void years. So he's got void years.
So you want to give him even more void years to make the dead cap hit at some point?
No, but what I'm saying is you already have the placeholder of the void. So I'm pulling up his contract real quick. So he's got 25, 26, and 27 as void years on his current contract. So you already have those dummy years in place. So you just kind of, it's bookkeeping, and essentially that's the way the Eagles do business. But what they can't do is bring him back and say, all right, you got to pay for $15 million a year. And Bryce, and by the way, I think Bryce Huff is a great signing. I think he's their best free agent signing. It's all about evaluation. But that's what you're trying to do in free agency. That's what I think you should be trying to do, BLG, is find a young ascending player who's got more than he's shown in the past. Not what he's done in the past, but he's going to do more in the future. That's the trick. I think that's what they may have gotten with Bryce Huff. We'll see how it plays out. But right now you can't pay Hassan Reddick less than Bryce Huff. You can't.
Right. Yeah. It feels a little like you're almost looking for the next Hassan Reddick. And it's just like, well, you have the real thing here. Like this, okay. Like the best case scenario for Bryce Huff is he becomes, I think, like pretty much what we've seen out of Hassan Reddick the past 2 years. Like that's a really, really great scenario if that comes to pass. And there's reason to be optimistic that like can happen. That's the ceiling that might play out, but it's not a guarantee. That's the top end outcome. So that's the part that's frustrating, I think, a little bit too, where it's like, oh man, like what if Bryce Huff can hit his ceiling? It's like he'll look like Hassan Reddick. Okay. You mean like the guy with the fourth most sacks in the NFL?
That's fair.
Yeah.
And Hassan had 2 double-digit sack years leading into the contract when he got the Eagles. Bryce Huff has only had 1. I get it. The salary cap's gone up. The price of poker has gone up, but they're projecting more with Bryce Huff than they did with Hassan Reddick before Hassan has had these 2 outstanding years here in Philadelphia. I threw his name out earlier. Maybe you responded with his name. Justin Simmons. I get it. He's 30 years old, and maybe more so this season, like with Hassan Reddick, you drag that 3 number into the conversation, and someone's 30 years old, and red flags go off all over the place. Oh, you can't play him. You can't go long day. You can't give him double-digit $1 million. For some reason, the age of 30 now, you're destined to be falling off a cliff. I don't buy it. He was damn good again last year. I know we just went through watching James Bradbury come back to the pack really quickly, really badly, but I'm not living in fear. I would love to see them get this guy. We thought that it was a natural fit when he got released because he played for the new DC out there in Denver. It seems like it's very slow moving, that I'm not even hearing any good, juicy rumors as to Justin Simmons. I'm guessing that his ass number is still pretty big, even though he got released after free agency started. What are the chances that Justin Simmons becomes a Philadelphia Eagle over the next week to 10 days?
Yeah, James Bradbury, who's still on the roster, by the way, still here for now at least. We'll see how that goes. But on Justin Simmons, yeah, I mean, back when he was released, I mean, it just seemed like such a no-brainer that he could end up in Philadelphia, especially because when the Eagles hired Vic Fangio earlier this year, I mean, I think pretty much, if I'm not mistaken, Justin Simmons had the most positive things to say about him, which is relevant too in the context of other players not necessarily being
Miami.
Thrilled about him or happy about him on the opposite side leaving Miami. So I thought that was noteworthy, and it just makes a lot of sense to me in that in a perfect world. And obviously I don't know exactly what they've promised Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. It seems like he wants to play safety, but in a perfect world, I mean, you can move him into the slot. You have Justin Simmons and Reed Blankenship / you still have Sidney Brown coming back from injury. And I think that's a really good secondary outlook all of a sudden. So, yeah, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense to do it. I think they're probably just at a spot where, you know, you're probably waiting out his market a little bit, waiting for that price tag to come down. But if there's an opportunity to strike, and it's probably, I think you could probably maybe, you know, finagle that on a 1-year deal. I think that makes a lot of sense.
How much is too much in your mind, BLG, when it comes to positions? And I'll go back to Reddick as well and Simmons, but you just listed off the names. You know, it's kind of roster building as a science, right? And how we talked about getting Nolan Smith involved. So if you have all three, if you have Reddick and Huff and Sweat and BG and Nolan Smith, how much is too much? Same thing at safety. You bring up the young players. I don't know where you are with Reed Blankenship. You know, he seemed to be a decent prospect. I know some people are like, Reed, nothing. I thought he played pretty well for the most part. A little too injury prone. You'd like to see him stay on the field. Sidney Brown showed tremendous upside, I think, even playing out of position for the most part. If you're bringing in CJ and Justin Simmons, does that stunt development of good young players? Can there be too much at positions in the NFL?
Yeah, I think that's fair to consider, you know, in your evaluation there. But I just think, you know, the talent, and we've seen Justin Simmons' playmaking ability. Like, I think that's tough to, and it's, you know, obviously the obvious fit with Vic Fangio. I think that just makes it more of a unique situation there. You know, I still am high on Reed Blankenship. I think people have been a little bit too tough on him. You know, you talk about struggled down the stretch last year. I think part of that was he did get banged up a bit, and I don't know if he was ever fully healthy. And then also the whole defense fell apart. Almost everyone played terribly. So at least he kind of showed some promise earlier in the year, and he had a great training camp and everything. So I still feel bullish on Reed Blankenship. But, you know, I don't think it's to the point where you have to, you know, necessarily definitely commit to him playing 100% of the snaps as much as you can afford a rotation in there. And then the Sidney Brown thing, you know, obviously the Eagles have a better sense of that than any of us do, I would think. But, you know, that was a significant injury very late in the season. So I just don't want to be counting on that.
Yeah, I think Sidney Brown is in the background. He may be in the foreground by 2025, but for 2024, I think you have to put him in the background and say anything we get from him is icing on the cake. Here's what it would come down to me with signing Justin Simmons. Are you okay with making Chauncey Gardner-Johnson your slot corner? If you are, then you go get Justin Simmons. If you're not, that you sign CJ and he's our safety in a pinch with injuries like we suffered through last year, we know we can move him in there and he can fill the void for whatever period of time that is. Well, then no, you don't sign Justin Simmons. If you look at CJ as an unquestioned safety, then you don't do it. But if you don't, if you say, yeah, I could see him taking more snaps at slot corner than safety, go the hell out and get Justin Simmons. I think it's a pretty easy read.
Yeah, I think you can mix and match there a bit. I don't think you have to fully commit to CJ being your nickel cornerback the whole time. But it certainly obviously is something you can do. Now again, it comes down to what he envisions his role to be and everything too.
Which,
And what
by
he
the
wants to
way,
do.
CJ said at his reintroductory press
Yes.
conference, I'm a safety.
Yes.
I'm one of the best young safeties. Yeah.
So that's that.
That does kind of rain on my get.
And don't forget, you got Tyler Hall.
That's true.
Tyler Hall. I'd like to call him draft proofing signings. PJ Mustipher, Paris Campbell, Tyler Hall. What is the most exciting one for Brandon Lee Gowton?
I would say Tyler Hall, in part
Really?
because they had such a musical chairs of options there at slot cornerback last year that they need to figure that out. And I don't know that Tyler Hall is going to come in here and be an excellent starter, but at the very least, I think you're hoping he can be like a better version of Josiah Scott, who when the Eagles had to play in the past when Avonte Maddox got hurt, would be a total liability, and defenses would clearly just go at that guy. So maybe at the very least, you're bringing in a guy who can kind of just give you a little bit more stability there, and I think that has value.
Speaking of slot corner, I know you text often with Roger Goodell. Could you hit him up this week and say, what the hell with Isaiah Rodgers? At some point, we'd like to know, is he going to be a Philadelphia Eagle this year or not? He can reapply, but the NFL can drag its feet for as long as the hell they want. Is Isaiah Rodgers going to get cleared to get back? Not get back for the first time, get into Eagle Green?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've all just kind of been assuming that, right? Like he'll definitely just get reinstated here.
I don't know. March Madness is going on. It's easy to hit that button, PLG, and place a little bet on UConn.
That's true. I'm looking back at last year. Calvin Ridley was reinstated like early March, and now we're in late March here.
Really?
Yeah. So I don't know what the timeline is on that, but you would think the Eagles, I'm sure, would hope to have that answer like before the draft, because that's pretty relevant. So
yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah. I do expect him back, but
Right.
you never know when it comes to personal conduct issues, because I make light of it, but it's possible. You got to do all the right things to be back.
Yep.
But certainly the Eagles have, obviously they signed him for a reason, and they thought he might be back. It's interesting to me because he played. I've seen a number of people say because he played outside in Indianapolis, well, he can't play in the slot. I'm like, well, he played outside in Indianapolis because they had Kenny Moore, who's one of the best slot cornerbacks in football. And if you look at him from a stature standpoint, he probably better suits himself in the slot. You think if they do get him back, you think he will be in the mix in the slot, or they look at him outside?
I think both. I honestly think we'll see him in both, especially if they're not feeling great about their nickel options there. Relatively speaking, he had success on the outside that I don't think they can totally just dismiss that. But yes, I do agree that his profile kind of lends to the slot, and obviously they don't have a surefire option there as it currently stands. So I actually do think we will see him in both spots.
BLG, I myself am a little confused with how I look at the next topic I want to touch on with you, because John and I all the time talk about the fact that the NFL does whatever the hell it wants, whenever the hell it wants, because they can. They have such revenue coming in and ratings off the charts or whatever. They're not really ever put into position to have to do anything. They just say, hey, take it or leave it. What are you going to do? Walk away? So when they do make changes, I have to give them credit for at least saying, yeah, we could look at this. We could actually improve our game. We could do something, because it's not necessitated by the interest that they generate from fans. This whole new kickoff thing, I read a story or two about it every single day, and how it's going to be implemented, and how it's going to work, and what they borrowed from the USFL and the XFL and whatever other L they needed to come up with a new kickoff rule. And I'm just confused. I don't get it. I don't see in my football mind's eye how it's going to play off. Is this something we should be giving the NFL credit for at least being open-minded to try and add a different element to their game? Is it something we should be questioning? Because what the hell are you talking about? You kick off from the third, but it's got to hit the landing area, and you got to catch it. And it seems to me like you need to take a master class to understand how kickoffs are going to go in the NFL. What's your take on, and it's going to be discussed at length and maybe even implemented this week at the owners meeting. What's your overall take on changing kickoffs in the NFL?
Yeah, I'm seeing from Jonathan Jones here that there's optimism that there's enough votes to potentially pass that for the modified kickoff. So, and that just came out. So we'll see how that goes. But in general, I'm pretty pro experimenting, especially to me, the kind of the precedent that was set was the ridiculous, Sean Payton pass interference is now challengeable kind of thing that the NFL made basically just to placate
that
him.
was awful.
Well, it's like, if we can do that,
yeah.
we can do anything. We can try anything for a year, and if it's terrible, it stinks, then just get rid of it the next year. That's fine. So that's kind of my general operating procedure at this point. I did like watching that kind of kickoff in the XFL. I thought there were some exciting results off of that, at least relative to the much neutered today's version of the kickoff. So I'm for it.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, BLG, that there's some, because I saw John Bossel. He's the one who's going to be, I guess, introducing it or whatever to the owners, explaining it. And he was saying there's some hesitancy yesterday, I believe. So I'm glad to see things are trending in a positive direction. They got to do something. I mean, it was ridiculous. It's just, it's a waste of 10 seconds. And then you just start at the 25-yard line. You bring one of the most exciting plays back in the game. I'm with you. It looked pretty good in the XFL. You're trying to limit the those explosive hits by putting the players closer together, so it makes some sense from a safety standpoint. I'm all for the new kickoff. The hip drop tackle, no, stop. What? I can't. Please help me. I can't figure this out. The players hate it. Everybody hates it. It's going to be so tough for the officials who just get lambasted anyway. And the NFL's like, nope, got to do it. Got to do it. Troy Vincent's out there, an ex-player. Boy, is he sold out, by the way. Sorry, ex-Eagle. Why?
It's not a real thing to me. Like it's not we use that name for it. I mean, you can.
Well, they made it up. They just made it up.
Exactly. I mean, obviously, it looks bad when you see it or whatever. There's been plays where players get hurt. Mark Andrews last year, but I don't think the player is doing anything illegal or dirty. It's just kind of an unfortunate situation, and that's football. And I don't get it. I really don't get how it's a thing.
And the one thing that they kind of slyly snuck out there this weekend, or maybe it was even the end of last week, fear not fans who think they're going to be flag after flag after flag after flag. It isn't something that is always going to be called on the field by a ref. But, oh, my God, when we watch those tapes after the fact, if we see a hip drop tackle, the fines are coming. That this is actually – that's why the players are pissed off about this, because they realize that's going to be the case. All right, I might not get a flag, but you're taking $14,000 out of my paycheck this week because I pulled a guy down, in your opinion, illegally? That's not as obnoxious to the actual playing of the game. But again, you're going to get players bitching about this every single week because they're just going to go $14,000 for you and 25 the percentage of the cap, and they're going to be throwing fines all over the place. That's why they comped it to the use of helmet thing, because that always lends itself more to a fine than an actual flag. The refs almost never call that, but they throw out fines for it every single week. That's got to be bad for the game.
I got to tell you, I hope you're right, Jody, that they never call it. I know the players are going to be right.
I won't say never.
But I know
I'll
what you're saying.
Less frequently than some people like Jody McDonald are worried about.
I hope you're right, and the players certainly are going to be upset about being fined, but I hope you're right, because that's 15 yards, and you're going to affect games, and people are going to be incensed when they see a poor defensive back trying to take down. You bring up Mark Andrews, BLG. It's usually that 185-pound defensive back trying to pull down this powerful tight end down the field. Yes, it's a dangerous sport. I go back to Kirby Joseph. Remember Kirby Joseph at the end of last season? He tore TJ Hawkinson's ACL and MCL with a low hit because he can't go high.
I was going to say, yeah, what's the new teaching point?
Yeah. And then 2 weeks later, almost the exact same play, Kirby Joseph tore the ACL and the MCL, exact same injury of Tyler Higbee. The unintended consequences of what they're trying to do, and boy, it makes no sense to me other than it's a dangerous sport.
I think it's just so subjective to really, it's not clear to me. I think it's very subjective and it's very unintentional. It's just going to happen because, like you said, you're just trying to take someone down. It's not legal. You're just legally trying to take someone down, and it might happen. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
BLG, I know on your site, you guys have fun like every other site with mock drafts. We're almost a month within the draft of actually taking place. We know what pick the Eagles have, but a whole bunch has got to happen before we get to number 22 when the Eagles pick. John and I talk a lot about draft proofing their roster and free agent signings and the like. A month out, what do you think Howie Roseman is looking at? What do you think he's targeting? Of course, it's going to be draft board, stay the course, take the guy in place, but we all look at it as positional needs, futures, and the like. What's your general read a month out on the Eagles and what they want to do the first 2 days of the draft?
Well, I think knowing Howie Roseman and how he wants to
Yeah, but we
invest
don't
in
know Howie Roseman. He gave a running back
He's
over
signing
$10
running
million.
backs.
It's
Yeah.
the new Howie Roseman.
I still think you look at a guy's draft history when it comes to the trenches, and I still think there's an overwhelming case there that he likes to do that. And I also think you look at the talent of this year's draft class, and I think that kind of matches up specifically on the offensive line. And I think that is ultimately kind of going to be where they end up going. I think and just looking at how they obviously have done it with other positions, but specifically, Cam Jurgens to ultimately replace Jason Kelsey, and then obviously Landon Dickerson before that. I think, and Andre Dillard in the past with Jason Peters and whatnot. They have this track record of kind of drafting the successor on the offensive line. And by the way, if they had to play a game today, who is the backup tackle on the left?
Fred Johnson, baby.
You're looking at Fred Johnson, right? I think they like Fred Johnson, but I think they would also like to get a more long-term option in there. So I think offensive tackle, ideally one who could potentially, maybe play right guard to fill in there, and then eventually take over for Lane Johnson on the right side. I mean, I think that's ultimately what they would love to see.
Yeah, I'm with you. At Brandon Gowton, I've said the same thing, and mainly because BLG, there's a shitload of tackles available in that first round, and they're going to start dropping because everybody's not going to take the tackle, and the Eagles are going to say, "This is great value." Now, Howie might also target, a corner and go up and get them, so he might have somebody in mind. But if they stay put, I think it's going to be offensive tackle. I'm with you. At Brandon Gowton, as I mentioned, follow him on X and Twitter. Does a tremendous job at Bleeding Green, all the podcasts with our buddy Jimmy Kempski. So if you were down there and you got past Kempski's sausage sandwich at the breakfast tomorrow to get the first question, what would your first question be to Nick Sirianni at the coach's breakfast? The AFC just wrapped up NFC tomorrow. Give me your first question to Nick Sirianni. It's about weaponizing Saquon Barkley. It's about his interacting with Kellen Moore. What could it be?
Yeah. I wouldn't ask him about Hassan Reddick. It's more of a Howie question for sure. I think it has to be about Saquon. That's the big story. What's the vision for him? Do you plan, to get him involved more as a pass catcher? Because we saw from last year, like in training camp, it seemed like DeAndre Swift was this big part of the passing game in training camp. And then,
by the way, sorry, I got to follow up. Sorry, Jody. I asked Dave Zangaro this last week, and I want to ask you because you've been around a long time covering this team. You've been at tons of practices. Anytime I hear about weaponizing in the spring, I just roll my eyes. I think I remember Darren Sproles. Remember 21 Pony with Darren Sproles and Donnell Pump? How do you stop it, BLG, in the spring? How do you stop it in T-shirts? DeAndre Swift last year. What a great pass catcher. It never comes to fruition.
Exactly.
Never comes to fruition. I'm not even blaming Saquon, but when I hear weaponize, I'm like, it's not going to happen.
That's
It's
something
just not going to happen.
you see with like all the fantasy football headlines, and then you know that section of the internet gets really excited about something. I remember this happening with Tony Pollard too in Dallas. They're like, "Oh, we're going to put Tony Pollard in the slot," and I mean, you know, maybe you see that like a handful of times in a season.
Yeah, the only guy who ever gets into the slot and does anything out of the backfield is McCaffrey. He's it. That's one. There's one in the league that actually works for. And oh, by the way, if I had my first question for Nick Sirianni, I'd combine both Brandon Lee Gowton and John Moan. How are you going to actually exist without the weaponization of Quez Watkins? That would be because we surely heard that from Nick Sirianni this year. And Quez still available. Shockingly, Quez has not signed.
Still available. Maybe he'll get a nibble down at the owners' meetings. Maybe.
Yeah, not happening anytime soon. BLG, a pleasure. We love the give the hat one more look, pull it down so we can see it again. That would be the Bleeding Green Nation Eagle right there. Make sure you check out his website on the daily for the owners' meetings into the draft. Does a great job with the draft. And you'll wise up between now and the draft. They're going to take a cornerback with that first pick. Not going to be offensive lineman, but just a
they better go up, or they're going to be
hand.
stuck with somebody.
Stuck with who? Cooper DeJean. I'll take him now.
I like him.
And get him at 21. They'll be a very good corner available.
What about Rakestraw? How do you pronounce his name? Is it Rakestraw or Rakestraw?
Some have him in the top 20, other have him in the second round. So if they take him at 22, I won't be happy. But I do think there's at least 4 corners that are worthy of being.
Christian Parker out watching him at Mizzou's Pro Day.
That's right.
Okay. I'd rather have the Alabama kid, the Clemson kid, Cooper DeJean. I think one of those 3 are probably, or the kid from whom I forget, Toledo. Why can't I think of
Quinyon Mitchell? Yeah,
Quinyon Mitchell.
He's not making it.
Yeah, he'll be gone, but he'll be one of those. So one of the top 4 cornerbacks will be there when the Eagles pick. We shall see. We only got a month to figure this shit out. So BLG, always a pleasure, buddy. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brandon.
That is Brandon Lee Gowton with his Bleeding Green Nation Eagle hat on. He's not fronting. He's just not going to tell you he's rooting for the Eagles.
I'm still waiting for my Birds 365 hats.
You and I bought. Are there such a thing as a Birds 365?
I don't know.
I know there are some T-shirts. Maybe you got a golf shirt or whatever, but I don't even know if there's a hat. All right, we'll come back hatless. We do have one more guest to go today. That would be our guy, Mark Farzetta. We haven't had Farzy on in over a month. You get him before us. You're going to get him with us. Mark Farzetta joins us in about 20 minutes from now. We'll come back. A couple more things I want to run by John. But before I do that, I would like to help save some money for you guys out there. If you would like to do just that with your car insurance, here's how. Birds fans, your chance to save up to 40% on your car insurance from one of JAKIB Sports' great partners. Call one of their 2 managing general partners. That would be either Jim or Fran, and tell them you'd like to save and you are a friend of both JAKIB Sports and Birds 365.
My name is Fran Salerno, and I'm a managing director here at Del Valle Insurance Group. Been in the business for over 36 years, saving people money on their insurance needs. Give us a call. Let us help you custom design an insurance plan that meets both your needs and budget.